Welcome to Love on the Line TV Conversations, and I am really super excited to be here with Sharon Armstrong from New Zealand, who has a very deep experience about romance scams. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, Sharon. I am really happy to have you here. Yesterday we went and we were part of a very exciting symposium in Brisbane. Mm-hmm. It was called the Tainted Love Symposium, and you were one of the key speakers. I just wanted to recall that, how we met.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I think it must have been the middle of October last year, and I was invited to speak at the Queensland Fraud and Recovery and Support Group.
Yes.
And you were in attendance there, and after I'd given a little bit of my story and what had happened to me, we sort of chatted afterwards. You wrote a blog, and we've sort of stayed in touch on social media since.
That is right. We were also connected by the social media,
That's
which
right.
is very interesting because
Yes.
we are talking about something which happens online.
That's right.
And many people say that you are in social media and you never really connect, but we have. And
Absolutely.
Yeah. And this is what happens with romance scams.
Yes.
People connect online.
That's
And
right.
so we have a very different experience about the romance scams.
Yes.
But and I was deeply taken by your story, and because my story is just so very brief, and basically it just woke me up into this world. Your story is such a huge story. It was 2012, right?
2011 when I was arrested.
Yes, and then you came back after.
I've been home just over 2.5 years now, and I was locked up for 2.5 years. So it happened April 2011. when
Okay.
I was arrested.
Would you say that your recovery started already when you were Argentina, or did it really start after you came home? What would you say?
No, I believe my recovery started fairly early on after my arrest. I think one of the unique things about my situation in recovery is that because I was removed from society and had no access to technology, therefore, any form of media, it was almost like I had the opportunity to look in depth. I wasn't dealing with the normal day-to-day things that many victims of these types of scams are left to deal with. They're
Yes.
still having to get on with their lives. They're still having to get up and, do the same things they did before this traumatic experience happened. Whereas for me, I really just had myself and my thoughts at
Yes.
that time. Yes, I have a close family and I was in touch with them, but essentially I was really only responsible for myself. So I believe my first step towards recovery was realizing that I needed to express how I was feeling to the scammer.
Yes.
And the impact that had on my life.
Yeah.
And I sat down one day and wrote this letter to him, knowing that he would never receive it, knowing that I was never going to post it, but it was more a step in the healing that I felt I needed to do. So I did. I wrote about the impact to myself personally, to my family, the situation that I'd found myself in. And then after I'd written it, I thought, right, do I destroy this? But no, actually I've held on to it.
Yes.
I still have it. I believe that was the beginning of me accepting, even though I wrote it to him,
Yeah.
it was to the him that I believed was real. But at that stage, of course, I knew that he didn't exist.
Yes. And did you then after that keep a journal?
Yes, I'd started keeping a journal prior to that actually. Probably started my journal a week after my arrest when I first got paper and pens, and I just started recording or writing about the day-to-day things that were happening in prison, times where I was probably feeling very upset, very sad, very lonely. I would write a bit about that, but I tried to use it more as a way to keep myself stimulated and to start to create some focus around where I wanted to go.
Yes. Yeah, I understand that fully because I also did a lot of journaling. Well, of course, I was able to talk to all these people, and I was on social media, and that is a big difference between us. Is that, like, you know, your healing has to happen at the same time as you are actually confronted with the social media. And very often what I have found is that it sort of leads into a little bit of an addiction.
Yes.
That you sort of change from being addicted to this, like what happens in your brain, and being high with the scammer, so it into the chasing scammers.
Yes, yes.
And how did you feel when you came back home?
You mean in terms of the scammer, or?
In terms of, yeah, and how your recovery then proceeded after, from that point when you actually were home, you were able to use all the resources you would have.
Yeah, I think because I was there for 2.5 years,
Yeah.
I think by the time I left prison, I was in a good space. I could think about the scammer and not feel like, you know, I wasn't feeling anger, I wasn't feeling grief for the loss of the relationship or anything like that by that stage. So coming home was really more about making some decisions around where to from here. It wasn't easy because there was still some media interest, and I chose, under the guidance of a very wise media person, to then just step away from any media contact for 18 months. In hindsight, that was a very good thing to do. It gave me a chance to just slip back into doing a bit of work. But I reached a point where, and I knew this when I was still locked up in prison, that I would do something with the new knowledge that I'd gained in my experience and what I'd been through and my learnings.
Yeah.
So it was really just how that would manifest more than anything.
Yes, last year when we met first time, and you were talking about the stand up to scams, and that's how we connected also online, and afterwards you started that one, but then now you started the Mule.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, well, stand up to scams sort of came about. I was approached about 15 months ago by a journalist from New Zealand who wanted to do a story on what had happened. So when this documentary first came out, I thought, right, you know, now's a good time to try to set up a social media campaign. It's something I've never done before. But so I decided, well, I'll check out how to do a page on Facebook, which I did. We came up with the name Stand Up to Scams because I really wanted something in terms of the campaign to portray a strength, to come from a position of power, a position of strength, rather than from a victim point of view. So the Stand Up to Scams was really about taking back the power and being able to stand up and talk about what had happened to me. So I set up Stand Up to Scams on Facebook and on Twitter. And as you mentioned earlier, I found it incredible in terms of establishing relationships. So through that, you know, I've got some other relationships now with other like-minded people across the world, which has been very advantageous. But from there, actually at around the same time, I was contacted and ended up speaking with an international human rights lawyer who actually I knew 20 or so years ago from my days working in corrections. He's very involved in Law Aid International and Slave Seas. He was the first person that put to me that he believed I was also a victim of human trafficking, which I found very interesting at the time, because for me at that point, when I thought of human trafficking, I thought of, you know, women that had been kidnapped and sent overseas and trafficked to wealthy businessmen for, you know, a variety of sordid things. So, or children being trafficked across borders. But when I actually looked at the definition and explanation around human trafficking, it is about the exploitation of people. Generally, you know, across other jurisdictions. And so we've been operating now for some 11 months, and currently not receiving any funding, but we haven't actually actively sought it. But we offer free advice and support to people that may find themselves arrested overseas, particularly as unwitting drug mules or unwitting money mules. We also provide services to those who may think they're being scammed, who are being scammed, who are in recovery, who just wish to talk to someone.
Yes, and
Yeah.
this is very individual because you know we we know that this problem is huge,
Yes.
and it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Like $339 million in 2015 was. This is only in Australia.
Yes,
went into internet fraud.
Yes.
So that's a huge. Even though like. Romance scams was only 23 million, and that had gone down a little bit. That doesn't really say anything because it's just the tip of the iceberg.
And what's even more frightening for me around that whole area is that they're the ones that we know about.
Exactly.
You know, there are so many, and I've had many people that have contacted me that have unfortunately been to the police but got no further with that. There's nothing they've been able to do, and this is in New Zealand I'm talking about. Or, you know, they just have nowhere to turn.
Exactly.
And so, you know, some of them haven't even told their families. They're dealing with it themselves.
Yes.
And I find that very sad that we're not better structured in the way we're dealing with this situation. I mean, I was blown away yesterday. There's some very good things happening here in Australia, and I suspect that some of the initiatives are probably, you know, leading in the world in terms of what is being done in this particular area. So
I was
that's
also
encouraging.
That's right. I was very, very taken by that the symposium.